Okay, so let's continue on from where we were yesterday. Okay, so when Nagarjuna says in the Karikas, chapter 24, verse 18, gee, I'm quoting chapter and verse. I never thought I'd hear myself do that. different books. That which is dependent arising is explained to be emptiness. That being a dependent designation is itself the middle way. Okay, so when we start off understanding emptiness, we start thinking, I mean, there's many different ways to meditate on emptiness, but one way, through understanding dependent arising, is that we meditate that things are functioning things are dependent on causes and conditions. So that's the verse in here that says, one who sees the infallible cause and effect of all phenomena in cyclic existence. Actually, all phenomena means all things, because it's only functioning things that are causal. And destroys all false perceptions of their inherent existence, has entered the path which pleases the Buddha. So that's where you begin with that first understanding and of dependent arising. That leads you to an understanding of emptiness. Okay, then after you've contemplated emptiness, things exist. Yeah. I mean, there's things all around you, but the question is, how do they exist? So there's only two ways they can exist. Either they're inherently existent, or they're dependently existent. Yeah, and since you've just understood emptiness, you realize they aren't inherently existent, and the kind of dependently existent way that they exist, that you see they exist, is through dependent designation, which is a much subtler level of dependency than causal dependence. Okay? So after you perceived emptiness, then you understand much more deeply what dependent designation is. That things are empty, they exist. The only way for them to exist is by existing through dependent designation. Okay, and so then, that being a dependent designation is itself the middle way. Okay, so understanding dependent designation gives you the understanding of the middle way, and that emptiness is the middle way, and dependent designation is also the middle way, because they come to the same point. Okay, and both of them, in one way or another, counteract the extreme of absolutism, or holding things to be inherently existent. And they also counteract, both of them, in one way or another, the extreme of non-existence, which is thinking that nothing whatsoever exists. So those are the two pitfalls that you want to avoid when you're meditating on emptiness. Either not negating enough, which is your absolutism, you're still clinging to inherent existence, and that's what most of the lower schools do, or going to the other extreme and negating too much, and that's the extreme of nihilism, and that's what a lot of the materialists do. They negate too much. Okay? So that whole view is what is meant by the middle way view in this context. Yeah? And that's really important to get, because if you have the middle way view, then you can realize the ultimate nature of reality, and that realization complements and makes stronger your understanding of the functioning of karma and its effects. So you have more respect for karma when you've realized emptiness. It's not that you dismiss karma and say it's all empty, so it doesn't matter. But because you understand dependence even more deeply, because you've understood emptiness, then you really value how karma and effect works. So this realization is said to be very difficult to come by. How you negate the inherent existence and also establish conventional existence. And I remember Lama Zopa saying one time, talking about this, he's saying, it's as if things barely exist. They're not non-existent, but they barely exist. You know, in contrast to the way we see things now, which is, you know, everything is concrete and smack in our face. Okay? So then the next verse, there does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen. Therefore, there does not exist anything that is not empty. Okay, so here the meaning of dependent arising is stretched to include also permanent things. And remember when we went through with Jeffrey, the you know, when he made you recite the Sanskrit, yeah, for you know, Paticca and then he was explaining how the Tibetans broke it down into 3 different things: dependent and reliant, and what was the last one? The English, dependent, reliant, and related. Okay, you know, and so and he explained how there you're stretching it to include also dependence on parts, mutual dependence, dependent designation. Okay, so it's easy to see that permanent things depend on designation because we see that just our thought makes them up. Yeah, I mean that's something even the lower schools can realize, you know, kind of the elephant in the room or the lack of the elephant in the room that exists due to our conception. Okay, the elephant in the room doesn't exist. The lack of the elephant in the room is an existent phenomena, but it's made up, you know, by our conception. Okay, so His Holiness said, memorize these 2 verses, okay, and then when you do deity yoga or guru yoga, recite these 2 to meditate on emptiness. So it was interesting, he said, rather than reciting Sanskrit mantras that you don't understand, he was talking to the Tibetans, because at this point you usually say Om Sabhava Shuddha Sawadharma Sabhava Shuddha Om Sunyata Jana Sabhava Atma Koham, you know, you usually say those. And so he's saying to the Tibetans, rather than reciting the Sanskrit that you don't understand, recite these 2 verses in Tibetan that you do understand and meditate on them. And it made me think how in so many Western Dharma centers, people recite so much in Tibetan that they don't understand. And that's why His Holiness really encourages people to do their practices in their own language so that they understand. So here's even 2 small mantras, you know, that he says to the Tibetans, better you say something in Tibetan that you do understand rather than those. I thought that was quite interesting. If you, of course, you know, when you receive teachings, you know, in deity yoga and the meaning of those 2 mantras, then you know what they mean. You can meditate on them. But these verses are actually a little bit longer, so they give you a few more clues. Okay, so he says. Yeah, it's better to contemplate those. And so when, actually let's leave it at that, and tomorrow I'll take on about how to actually contemplate it. Okay? Yeah?
Is dependently designated synonymous with merely labeled, or is there some difference?
Is dependent designation synonymous with being merely labeled? According to the Prasangika view of merely labeled, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Although Jeffrey said he doesn't like the word labeled, so I want to ask him why. You know. Yeah. So designated, imputed.
Well, we had to talk about this while you were gone.
Oh, yeah, what did he say?
He said, yeah, something like labeled as, yeah, too firm or something.
Or too gross?
Yeah.
That?
It didn't denote what's happening cognitively
Right.
as deeply, I think. Like you can label soup cans.
Oh, okay.
But there's a process that we go through when something is designated that's kind of a deeper process
Yeah.
in the mind.
Okay.
That's how I understood it.
So the term gives
Yeah, I remember that explanation.
yeah, more of an indication, designation of a deeper process than just label like sticking something on.
Designating all the soup cans,
Yeah.
things like that.
Okay. Did he say anything about imputation? What he thinks about that term? Okay. Because there's sometimes they use imputation, sometimes posit. But posit is confusing because sometimes posit means to establish something, which means to say it's existent. And sometimes posit means to designate it. So, yeah. Okay. So, our designated meal. Does it seem like a designated meal, or does it seem like it's real out there? It seems very real, doesn't it? It's out there on that table, waiting for us to eat it. Yeah? And there's me here, and the meal over there, and that meal exists totally independent of me. Yeah? And even when we look at the meal, you know, do we look at the meal as if it were caused?
It's almost like
the cook.
Yeah. The cook may, but even when it's out there, even if you cooked it, it still looks like it's there with just...
it's there every day.
Yeah. and when we look at it, I mean, it looks real out there, and we don't think that in a half an hour it's not going to be there. It looks quite firmly existent to us, doesn't it? You know, like even we take some out of the pot, the meal is still there. There's still food there. Yeah.
And it just appeared.
Yes.
Appears.
It just appeared.
Complete.
Yeah. And we don't think of it, you know, the things having grown. Yeah.
It's funny because it makes me think about how in terms of, I think of past, present, and future are really kind of, I don't know, conceptualizations. I have such a, maybe an ignorant understanding of what it is. Like, it was made in the past, but it's there now, you know, like, and it's always kind of there.
Always there,
Right?
yeah.
And maybe it'll be gone in the future, but that's so, it's not even, I don't even
On your
grab
radar
onto it,
now,
you know?
right. Especially with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we look at a person, do we think, oh, they were once a baby and sometime they're going to die? No.
Yeah,
They're just there. They're always the same age.
right. There's nothing in them right now that could change into an old
Yeah.
person.
An old person. And there's nothing in them right now that used to be a young person. They're just there. I mean, it doesn't take much analysis to see that the way we commonly relate to things is completely off the wall, completely wrong, you know? And yet we believe it so tenaciously, don't we?